Well, it was just really so there are these kind of sort of history matching techniques have not been used very much in infectious disease, but there are a few papers which I'm happy to share somewhere, or I can put the links somewhere, maybe on the Slack channel or something if people are interested in them. They're not COVID related. They all relate to a HIV model that came out of the London School. So it was work with the London School of Hygiene and Durham and Sheffield. There's also, so we have got, so within Exeter, Peter mentioned, I think, that we were beginning to work on the, on Leon Danon's meta wards model. So there is a GitHub site where we're hoping to put tutorials and vignettes and analyses and all of that sort of stuff. It's very, very, very much work in progress. At the moment, we are just trying to get the model set up on the servers and things that we can run, but hopefully we'll add to that, because I think you know, one of the key things is that there is a lot of literature around these sorts of techniques, but it's mostly in the stats literature and quite a lot in climate science. So I think we were going to try to do something which made it a little bit more accessible to people, particularly in epidemiology. And that's where I kind of fit in, because, you know, I'm not a UQ expert. So I'm kind of a good sanity check that you know, if I can understand it, then that's probably a good place to start. Peter, is Peter or Danny on the line? Did anyone else want to come in on that?
Doesn't look like anybody's jumping in, does it?
No,
I'm happy to say something. Yeah, we're using the experience of working with Leon to try and make more general things, to make a resource for the community. So there will be vignettes and examples and such like, but if you've got a particular question, just drop us a line.
Can I just add, because I can't seem to type in the chat, we have a number of vignettes there and links to automatic UQ codes in other places. At the moment, we've just run a large ensemble with the meter wards, and that's one of those models that takes a very long time to run at its high resolution. So it's useful for UQ, whereas I think some of the models in the earlier talk, they're fast enough that you can do the sort of Bayesian inference on the fly, a bit like Peter said at the start of his talk. But there's stuff there already, some nice plots, but we are just starting.
Thank you. Generate some more chat. Any more questions? Any more points about network models? I'll just pick on some people if no one volunteers about network models in the current context. Anyone willing to put up their hand? Oh, Bernard, go on, go for it.
First of all, I'm going to do something really naughty, which is I apologise. I was doing other things. I didn't hear all of the talks all of the time. I was around them. I think getting over this, getting into the public domain, this idea that network modelling is so important is really key. And some of the things that have been said are really interesting. And in particular, you know, the trouble is we've sold a little bit of science with the R value, and now we're worried that it's too simplistic, and rightly so, because I think the public would understand better some of the restrictions that have been placed if it could be explained that it is all to do with the nature of networks. And I think people would understand that. And actually, it might be worth thinking about producing little little pictures, little models that you could show, you know, little sort of pictures of things spreading around, videos of, and you know, where you have the same you know, different structures of networks show different ways of behaving. So that's something that might be worth doing from a presentational point of view, because I think it would explain things. And also a point that's been made earlier as well is the absolute importance of excellent software engineering. I mean, it's been the bane of my life for decades that, you know, you get code. And I can remember having graduate students and they would say things like, well, I've written the code, but I haven't written the comments yet. And I'd say, you did it the wrong way around. And that was 1970s and 80s software engineering, and now it's much better. And so I want to commend, that's really important as well, because we cannot be in a situation where results can be criticized on the grounds that, you know, it sort of wasn't very well engineered. Because you wouldn't put up with that in any other field of life, and so that's very important. But coming back to networks, some simple demonstrations, simple computer demonstration simulations that showed the difference between different network structures would, I think, go a long way to explaining to the public and politicians and other scientists what's going on here. So thanks very much indeed for a very interesting talk.
So Megan.
Bear with me one moment. I think we're nearly there.
I was going to say, I'm not sure there's, well, if you can do it.
People have their hands up, Dennis, if you want to call on them, Peter and Carl.
Sorry? Yeah, there's some more questions. Yeah, I'm just wondering where, yeah, okay. Yeah, Megan, is it okay if you get this done if we overrun the session a little bit?
No problem at all.
Okay, because I think we'd probably better go on a few extra minutes, so as to, because I think we should cut the time in breakout rooms to 15 minutes. That's still like a little bit of time to get back together. So Peter had a question.
Well, it is more a remark actually, which I want to make. Some years ago, Frank Ball, Tom Britton, Jacco Wallinga, and Titran and Jean-Stéphane Dessin and I had done some work on how important is it to know the structure and how good do we do if we just assume homogeneous mixing. Of course, that depends on the question. But if you don't know the network, then it is an important question to ask. Well, if we just ignore it, how important is it? And it turns out, at least for initial behavior, what you observe, which is usually a growth rate, and what you an estimate for R0. Well, if you have exponential growth, then you can basically ignore network structure, multidimensional structure, and so on. Your model is wrong, but your estimate of R0 is still good. Of course, if you want to do analyze measures to adapt the network structure, you have to take a network into account. But perhaps it's not too important to have a very detailed view of the network. A bad model can give pretty good results as long as that model has some right intuition behind it. So don't be too afraid to have a too simple model. However, what is very relevant is how, and I said it yesterday as well, is that you have some kind of the right idea about what the latent period distribution is and what the infectious period distribution is and how the infectivity profile changes over time, because those have direct impact. So I think it's inexcusable to have a very detailed network model and then just use exponential infectious periods. That's just the remark on network modeling, which was asked.
Okay, so we have maybe 1 or 2 minutes from each breakout group just to say if you came up with at least one useful thought. So Emma, you were going to report for us from Breakout Room 5.
Okay, great. So we kind of started off thinking about the more general questions, but Carl brought up this really important point that the modeling the spread of diseases and the field that we're working in, like we need to be careful not to present our results as being like comparable to those that you would see in systems in physics and engineering, where systems are perhaps better characterized in a lot of settings. Like this description of the R statistic and how we're using that to determine the outcome and like measure the outbreak is very easy for people to read into that in being like us implying that we believe the system is well characterized or that we understand the system in some particular way. So we were mainly talking about the nuances of that and how it's important to kind of explain the uncertainty, not just in our parameters and in our model structures, but also in just the sheer complexity of the system, but also how to balance that with actually saying that our model results can be useful despite all of this.
Thanks very much. So next breakout room.
If you're going back downwards, I think that might be us. We were number 4. So we talked about different models and whether we should use simple models or complex models. And Stephen introduced this really nice idea of thinking of the question you're trying to answer, the data you've got, and the model as a triple. So your model is specific to the question and the data that you're trying to answer together. And Valerie suggested a question that we might ask would be, how do you know when using a simple model will give the right answer? And we talked about a few other things about maybe in meteorology or other areas, the models that are more similar to each other, about differences between epidemiological models. Let me know if I've missed anything, anyone from our room.
Okay, fine. Room 3. We have room 3.
Was that us, perhaps?
Okay, Peter.
Oh, Pavel, you want to say something?
No, I think I remember vaguely remember seeing 3 somewhere. So yeah, I think it was us.
Do you want to say something? Oh.
Only if you missed something.
Okay, then I'm the one talking. Sorry, wait 1 second. Sorry for this, but now, so we had some quick discussion or some discussion about what is or how do programs perform, what's out there, how quick are they? That was one thing where there was a lot of discussion, or was some discussion about. We had a bit of problem that discussion started too quickly, so we didn't have a real note taker to start with. I think there was a lot of discussions about clarifying things and not as much putting forward a clear question which we can address to the whole group. I'm sorry for that. Also, there seemed to be sometimes a reinvention of the wheel to both sides. And here we have to help each other, like some models which are already studied in the 70s by mathematicians like Dennis on the purely spatial epidemics, and traveling wave behavior, and later some models on long-range percolation, which exists since the 80s, I think, in mathematical literature, might be useful. And then we had some discussion, might be this useful now as well, although they probably only give qualitative insights, not anyway quantitative. And then the final thing is that where can we look for more information for a disease like this? Having contaminated surfaces is already a big known thing for some animal diseases, where going to the meadows, a cow can be infected by being too close to the poo of another cow. And in human diseases, for example, you can think of the hospital bacteria, where contaminated surfaces are also important, which might be we want to take into account in COVID as well. Pavel.
Okay, thanks. So that's one more room. I think is that Ben to report.
Yeah, that's right. So I think we really focused on how RAMP could contribute in general to the overall process, in that it's consists of a lot of people that have potentially useful expertise, but not necessarily direct experience of working in these sorts of epidemic models and pandemic type situations. So we talked a lot about the workflow and how we think it perhaps could have been approached, or the extra information that might have been beneficial to the community in terms of perhaps knowing areas that would be good to avoid. We talked a lot about the fact that often people, lots of people could fit SEIR type models themselves, but obviously there's a lot of expertise already in epidemic modeling for that type of thing. So how would we go about making sure that the information is passed on to the community in terms of what is already being done, what's best to avoid, and facilitating the expertise in areas perhaps in parameter inference, model uncertainty, emulators that Peter was talking about earlier, and how we would go about really utilizing the expertise in other areas. And then again, how we would combine the process of data collection, inference, sensitivity, and simulation all together into a single workflow that's going to continue to feed into each other, and hopefully then drive the questions forward in future in terms of what we still need to know and still need to work on.
Okay.
So I think that was, unless anyone else wants to add anything, I think that was the main focus of our room.
Okay, thanks. I think there's one more room. Is that Jamie to report?
Yes, well, I'm Jamie's room. Jamie, I don't know if Jamie's still here. What we thought was important is that models should be somehow validated against the data. What we felt we don't see enough of at the moment is people write a model, say what's going to happen, but then they don't go back to determine whether that actually did happen or not. And similarly, people don't use a technique of if the model was correct and apply it to data from a month ago, then my model would predict these things. Are they right? There just seems to be an awful lot of showing that your model can fit the data you've actually got, whereas there's not as much of what we typically do in the physical sciences, saying, well, here's some data, let's pretend we don't know that. Does my model actually forecast that? And we felt that's something that models should be doing more. Okay. Especially when the building of the model has so many arbitrary inputs. It's impossible to really understand by reading the papers who's got it right and who's got it wrong.
Okay, any quick comments from anyone?
I just jumping very briefly on the last point. So that in flu, there has been there has been a bit of work on prospective forecasting, and that is not necessarily evident in everything that's going on now with COVID. But if you do have an interest in that, I'd definitely point you towards influenza forecasting as a topic. And there are some guidelines that are about to come out. That they're trying to do a kind of like a checklist for infectious disease forecasting studies. So I totally agree that it's not evident in the current COVID work, but there has been some work on that in the last kind of 5-10 years. Over.
Okay. Yeah. Request to Steve to give a link on flu forecasting. Perhaps you could post that in Slack, or that'd be, or email me and I'll pass it. I'll do that. So thanks everyone. I'm sorry we ran over time because of the teething troubles with the breakout rooms. Just sort of final announcement. I should just looking forward to the next session. There's nothing more today, but tomorrow we've got sessions both morning and afternoon. Morning was just to be the virtual coffee room, but we now also have a presentation by Vittorio Kalitza on infection control in facilities, because that was the only time Vittorio was available. So there'll be a session from 10 till 12 tomorrow, starting with Vittorio Kalitza at 10, and then after that there will be trying out this virtual coffee room. And on the virtual coffee room, the idea is it gives you an opportunity to have your own breakout room with people interested in what you want to discuss. So if anyone would like to propose topics, it would be nice to have topics before 10:45 tomorrow, and then we can give people chances to have further chats in groups about topics of shared interest. And then we have a full program on Wednesday afternoon. I hope to get a complete program with possibly a few question marks on the final sessions posted on the Newton web pages and emailed around everyone late this afternoon. But I thought it was important to pass on immediately that we do have a session starting at 10 tomorrow morning with Vittorio Kalitza. Pavel, you had a question?
Yes, just a quick question. You keep mentioning the Slack where things get posted. Is that something that's internal to INI, or is this something, or is that something that all attendees have access to?
It's for the workshop.
Okay.
Julia is probably the person who set it up to.
Nope, not me. Deirdre, I think.
It's Deirdre. Okay, it's Deirdre. Has everyone been told about it? And if not, should we send them all a reminder? Perhaps I should. I'll speak to Deirdre, and next circular round participants, I'll make sure there's some instructions how to join the workshop Slack group.
Oh, thank you.
Right, thanks. Okay, well, thank you all for an interesting morning, and I'll see you all again tomorrow, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.